Washington University in St. Louis, no longer such a warm place. That is the topic of today's video. My name is Craig Meister. I'm a college admissions coach. You can learn more about me and how you can work with me one-on-one throughout the entire college admissions process on my website, which is collegemeister.com. News this week has come out that Washington University in St. Louis, a university that has really made a name for itself since the early 1990s as being an institution that is of high quality educationally, but also in terms of supporting its students and supporting its alumni. Washington University has seen its rank in various prestigious rankings lists go up quite a bit from the early 90s to where we are today in 2024. And in no small part because of the efforts of professors, administrators, and students from the past. We learned this week that Washington University in St. Louis has decided to discontinue its interview program for first-year applicants. In particular, this is what has been shared with individuals who are a part of the alumni and parents admission program. Quote, after careful consideration, undergraduate admissions and university advancement have made the decision to discontinue the alumni interview portion of the program. Alumni have played an ambassadorial role in the university admissions process that has been tremendously valuable to alumni and students over the duration of the program. We deeply appreciate the connections our volunteers have made with applicants, and we know that this has been a meaningful touch point for many prospective students as they consider attending WashU. At the same time, we continually evaluate the equity of all aspects of our admissions process. New technologies and innovations in our approach have allowed us to improve equity of experience and opportunity, which are foundational to our admissions process. As application numbers continue to climb and the nature of the admissions review process has changed, new tools like our optional 90-second video are able to engage every prospective student, while alumni interviews are not feasible at the same scale. Furthermore, given the significant growth in the number of applicants since the APAP program began 31 years ago, from nearly 8,000 applicants in 1992 to over 32,000 applicants in fall 2024, some volunteers are frustrated when we are unable to admit the students they interviewed. In order to remain committed to equity and fairness in this shifting admissions landscape, we are evaluating new opportunities for alumni to engage with prospective students. Rest assured that we will continue to support all other current alumni and parent admissions program activities, college fairs, admitted student receptions, and summer send-offs, calling programs and resource lists to welcome admitted and enrolling families, and assisting with admissions information sessions and other targeted events. In addition, alumni and constituent engagement offers a wide variety of existing programs that will allow you to stay connected to WashU. Again, this was sent out to the members of the alumni and parent community who were very involved at WashU and were, in many cases, interviewing first-year applicants for sometimes not only years, but decades. As some of our most engaged alumni, we particularly hope you join WashU CNX, our online networking and mentorship community. We will keep you updated as new initiatives unfold. Please visit the APAP website, where we will post any new information and where you will find the announcement with frequently asked questions about this change. Thank you for your ongoing support as we continue to work together to recruit and welcome talented students to WashU. Warm regards, and it's signed by Susan Cohen, Associate Vice Chancellor of Alumni Engagement and Annual Giving, and Renee Turner, Vice Provost of Admissions and Financial Aid. So what are Craig Meister's thoughts on this? Well, my name is Craig Meister. I'm a college admissions coach, have you heard? And I've been working with students through the entire college admissions process for 18 years. So that's as long as current high school seniors have been alive. I have seen Washington University go from relatively obscure Midwest research university to a power rankings powerhouse. And like I said earlier, it has been built on the efforts, the foresight, the leadership of individuals who are no longer with WashU. And just now, in that email that was sent out to alumni and parents, we saw sort of a bridge falling down, similar to what we saw recently in Baltimore, Maryland, where another connection between the past and the present is being severed. And it's very sad to me because WashU has been an institution that has been known from the perspective of almost all who engage with it as a warm, student-centered university with amazing research resources. However, in recent years, the priority of WashU, as well as a lot of other institutions, has changed quite a bit to being focused on one thing above a lot of other things, which is equity. And so it's interesting that they mention equity in this email because equity is used as a way to preemptively prevent any alumnus or parent who runs in polite company from being too full of moxie and speaking out against what Ms. Turner and Ms. Cohen have declared in this email, because you don't want to be called names by Miss Renee Turner and Miss Susan Cohen if those names have anything to do with you questioning the value of equity over, let's say, continuity, over, let's say, tradition, over, let's say, being known as a warm, supportive, welcoming, friendly campus community right outside the heart of St. Louis. If those things mattered still, this would not be happening. At no point in the interview program that's existed for all these decades has WashU prioritized alumni interview students who interview and versus those who don't, in my opinion. I mean, I have seen students who have not interviewed get in. I've seen students who have interviewed get in. But the interview process has been a great way for students to get to know people who've attended or are related to people who've attended. And it's a great way for those people who've attended or have relations at the school currently or in the past to sort of connect with what's coming down the pike at WashU and how WashU is evolving. And I want to emphasize that I strongly believe that this is a power move. This is a power move by Ms. Turner and Ms. Cohen and WashU writ large, because as was indicated in the email, quote, I'll read it. I'll read this very interesting quote. Furthermore, given the significant growth in the numbers of applicants since the APAP program began 31 years ago, from nearly 8,000 applicants in 1992 to over 32,000 for fall 2024, some volunteers are frustrated when we are unable to admit the students they interviewed. That is such an interesting conjoined sentence. It's almost like a non sequitur. The beginning of the sentence is talking about, obviously application numbers have increased quite a bit. Again, because of hard work by people other than Ms. Cohen and Ms. Turner. However, it is also interesting that they end the sentence by alluding to the fact that we sort of don't like the fact that alumni are getting frustrated and questioning our admissions decisions. Now, they don't say it like that, but they say some volunteers are frustrated when we are unable to admit students they interviewed. Well, I would be frustrated too. If I've given a lot of money to WashU, or I know the WashU that existed in 1999 or 2005, and I've been very involved as an alumnus, and I'm not, by the way, but let's say I was, and I see certain really amazing students not getting in, I might speak up and be concerned and bring that to the attention of Ms. Turner. But I guess the powers that be over at WashU don't want to hear it. And maybe they're hearing it increasingly because the priorities of the admissions office are clearly maybe increasingly misaligned with the priorities of those interviewing. So They've just decided to sever this tie. Again, they don't want to call it severing because they're saying everything else about the APAP will continue. But for the purposes of those interviewing, it's over. It's over. The people who've committed years of their life as a volunteer to WashU will no longer get to see the types of students who are applying from their areas, and they will not also get to know who is or is not getting in as intimately as they otherwise used to. This reminds me a great deal of something Walt Disney World did. I don't know if you follow Walt Disney World. I'm sort of a fan of Walt Disney World, or at least I have been historically. I've gone there for many years, but there used to be a department at Walt Disney World called Disney Floral and Gifts. And Disney Floral and Gifts was like this special department at Disney World in Florida, Orlando, where they would make sort of special things happen for guests. If there was a special event, they would be involved with the floral arrangements or setting it up or creating special cakes or trinkets for special occasions for people visiting. It was like a really magical touch at a place that's supposed to be the most magical place on earth. Disneyland is supposed to be the happiest place on earth, but Disney World is supposed to be the most magical place on earth. So Disney World had this amazing in-house team of individuals who made Disney magic happen for families at all of their resorts across the whole property. And in 2003, they shut it down. The cost was no longer worth it to the powers that be at Disney World. And they outsourced floral arrangements to a local vendor. And needless to say, that local vendor may have the best of intentions. I don't know who that local vendor is, but they're not in-house. They don't have the historical memory. They're not as magical. Let's just put it that way. And there are fewer options to make your magical Disney experience come to life. Well, that's very much in line with everything else going on in the United States right now, in the world in many cases, but definitely the United States in terms of downsizing, in terms of cost cutting, in terms of, quote, greater efficiencies in the name of different important catchwords. And, we see this quite a bit. So Disney World is a far less magical place today than it was in the 1990s, let me tell you. And WashU is a far colder place than it was last week because of the decision, I think, to abort interviews and end interviews for incoming freshmen. It was amazing, or incoming prospective freshmen. It was an amazing opportunity for WashU to show that they had a special touch. I won't call it magical like Disney World, but I will call it sort of a real special way of sort of guiding you through the process, getting you comfortable with WashU, getting WashU to get to know you in diverse ways. But I don't want to just pick on, obviously this video is all about WashU, so I am picking on WashU in this video alone, but I will say this is not unique to WashU or Ms. Cohen and Ms. Turner. Whitney Soule over at my alma mater, University of Pennsylvania, has recently done away with alumni interviews at Penn. And they are now called conversations, and they are no longer really evaluative. Where they, again, used to be evaluative, so were the interviews at WashU evaluative. And they're all different. I don't remember exactly the reasons given behind that. But again, this has all happened relatively recently in conjunction with the going of test optional, in conjunction with the increasing subjectivity of the admissions process. We are pulling back on interviews, which again, arguably are subjective, of course, because real people are interviewing other real young people. But it was an interesting sort of opportunity at both of these institutions for very smart, engaged individuals who are not on the payroll of that institution to see who is applying and to see who is getting in and who isn't. And WashU is completely severing the program, whereas Penn, at least as of this video recording, has kept the conversations as conversations. I don't know, since I'm no longer on that committee of alumni at Penn, whether or not the people who engage in conversations are even sent an updated list about who they conversed with and whether or not they got in. But it's sort of neither here nor there, because they're also not writing evaluations anymore. So It's not like Penn is really getting feedback per se on the conversations. So it could just be interesting to know, and if you know the answer, please put in the comments, whether Penn is actually sharing with the conversers in the alumni community whether or not the people they converse with in the interview, the formerly known interview process, it's a conversation now, process, are getting in or not, because that would at least sort of maybe have a function of keeping Penn honest. God, dare I say it? WashU has burnt that bridge. That bridge has been hit by a ship. It has fallen, not in the Chesapeake Bay. I guess it's fallen in the Mississippi River. So there we are. And again, I think most of all, it's sad because, in no way am I arguing that someone who can't interview because maybe he or she lives in Botswana and there's no interviewer in Botswana, though of course there's a video conference. You can do Zoom in most places now. And very rarely can you not get it Google Meet or Zoom or some other virtual meeting with an alumnus somewhere else, maybe in South Africa or Zimbabwe or somewhere else. But let's say you're in Botswana, you're applying to WashU, and you simply can't get an alumnus to interview you locally. You probably could get someone to interview you virtually if they wanted to continue the program. And I'm sure WashU would have hundreds of alumni volunteer to interview that person in Botswana. But instead, WashU just decided they're not going to interview anymore. And that's because they don't want WashU alumni bothering them when their favorite applicants don't get in, amongst other things. I mean, there's obviously other things going on here as well, but the WashU alumni community is very committed, and they would rise to the occasion if necessary to interview each and every one of the 32,000 people who are applying. So there you go. I would say that WashU as an institution is still a very impressive institution in many ways, but it's a little less warm today than it was earlier this month, and certainly earlier in the 2000s and previously. And I mean, I will go so far as to say, both with Penn and with WashU, I really want to emphasize this, that these institutions were made great by people who are in many cases no longer with us on Earth, but of those who remain with us on Earth, they are increasingly not identifying as much with the institutions in question. And the individuals in question and their characteristics and their value systems, the people who made important strategic contributions to these institutions from both the adult side, but also from the student side, obviously young adult side, in, like I said, the 90s through, let's say, the 2000 to early 2000 teens. In many cases, the schools look very different, not just physically look different, but they also behave very differently, because the values of the institution now are controlled by a new cadre of individuals who have very different ideas about what a university should be and what makes a university great. And it's an interesting sort of changing of the guard. And I think we've seen it play out in different public forums in the United States over recent months. And I will say that all of higher education in the United States is being questioned more today than it ever was in the 1990s or early 2000s, for sure. So it's not unique to these two institutions, but schools like Penn, schools like WashU, schools like Northwestern and Vanderbilt, these are schools that really came out big. I mean, again, one of them was always an Ivy League school, but it was not. Let me make very clear. Penn was not a prime destination for many students in the early 1990s. Philadelphia was not a very lovely place. The campus was crummy. It was not safe in that part of West Philadelphia at all. The accoutrements, the aesthetics, the sort of Disney worldification of Disney World of Penn had not yet happened in the early 90s. By the late 90s and early 2000s, with a lot of investment, different financial policy, different things going on in terms of the promoting of higher education in the United States, but also the individuals who were coming in there. I mean, all those things combined to make a really magical moment for all of these institutions. And the people who contributed to that, both literally because they attended or they worked there and they built it, but also these same individuals, many of whom are still giving money. And that's why the development person's name is on there, Ms. Cohen, not just the admissions director's name, the provost's name, Ms. Turner. The people who have continued to give money to these institutions are in many cases hit in the face with surprise when they return to campus. Not all the time, but many times, to see what has happened to their beloved Penn or Vanderbilt or Northwestern or WashU. Because the freedom to question, the freedom to explore what a higher education institution was at those institutions in the 90s through, let's say, 2012, just rounding an even number, is very different than what those institutions have turned into over the last 12 years as of this filming. Whether or not the pendulum will swing back or go somewhere completely new or remain where it is today, I am not a fortune teller. I'm not a psychic. But what I will say is these were individuals who gave a lot and still in many cases give a lot. And this letter, if I received it as a WashU alumnus, would not sit great with me. It also did not sit well with me when Penn ended the interviews, because I feel like that was a really lovely opportunity for people other than just the individuals in the admissions office to have some stake in who was joining the club. Now, I don't want to make it sound like the club is like this elite club where only people that look and think exactly like the people who were interviewing should get in. No, I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is there is a respect for tradition. There is a respect for continuity. There is a respect for combining the best of the past and the best of the present and hopefully the best of the future. But when you sever that, when you end that, and when you give to a smaller and smaller number of people power over determining the makeup of the institution, at least in terms of students, and this is of course happening in HR as well, but especially in terms of students, because that's what I focus on in admissions, you have fewer checks and balances, and the institutions become different. They do become different. You may like the difference. You may love the difference, and you are entitled to that. I believe the difference has been a mixed bag at best for all the institutions named in this video. And we will see how this plays out at WashU and other institutions. I also think it's just a shame, frankly, that students, from the student perspective, from the 17 or 18-year-old student perspective, I think it's important to be able to have a two-way conversation and not just film yourself like you're doing a 90-second TikTok, which is what WashU is referring to when they're talking about their 90-second video. You can share that with WashU now within days of applying, a 90-second video looking at the camera like I look in the camera during these videos. But that's very different mode of communication. That's you narcissistically looking at a green dot, talking about yourself, and shaking your face and doing whatever you're doing, shaking your body and some, who knows what you're doing in those videos. Maybe an interesting background, much more exciting than the background I have. It's not having a two-way conversation with an adult who's lived this and breathed this. And it's by cutting that out, you're cutting out respect for people who are wise, who have been around the block, and who maybe have something to share and can talk about how WashU in this case was. It doesn't have to stay exactly the same, but does it have to completely radically change as well? I don't know. I don't believe it should, because WashU has been lovely for so many decades. And this could be a bridge too far for many. It may not be anything but a blip for many others, and that's okay. But I think it's a shame not to put applicants through the paces of actually engaging in a two-way conversation, not just looking at a dot on a screen when they're filming themselves and retaking it over and over again, but actually talking to an adult who has a relationship with WashU and remembers WashU like it was, whether it's from 3 years ago or 30 years ago or 40 years ago. There's something edifying about that from the perspective of the student. And there's a respect for elders. There's a respect for the past. And the people in power at WashU have spit in the face of that idea by doing this. They did not have to do this. Even if everyone believes in equity in its most progressive definitional manner, they did not have to do this. They chose to do this because they didn't want to get angry calls or emails, and they were done with it. And the powers that be wanted to do away with it, and they did it. And they have the power to do so. They have the power to do so. And WashU will reap the whirlwind. My name is Craig Meister. I'm a college admissions coach. If you're interested in learning more about me and how you can work with me one-on-one through the entire college admissions process, go to my website, which is collegemeister.com. You can also subscribe to my channel here, as well as like this video if you enjoyed it. Otherwise, stay safe, stay well, and most importantly, stay stress-free throughout the entire college admissions process.